In the final part of our special series, Boko Haram, Terror Unmasked, gripping stories of torture and escape as survivors speak out. A key test for the limits of presidential power as the U.S. federal court system weighs President Donald Trump's executive order on immigration. And getting to the heart of cardiovascular disease, we'll talk signs and symptoms in women. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Somalia has a new president. Lawmakers have elected a former prime minister who is a dual U.S. Somali citizen. Mohammed Abdullahi Mohammed, better known as Farmer Joe, was declared the winner after 2 rounds of voting by the Somali parliament in Mogadishu. Farmer Joe won the largest share of votes in the second round, far outdistancing the incumbent Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud. Abdullahi Mohammed was quickly sworn in and is pledging to improve security, fight corruption and help the poor. The 54-year-old Farmer Joe has spent much of his adult life in the northeastern U.S. city of Buffalo, New York. He was Somalia's prime minister for 8 months during 2010 and 2011 at the height of the insurgency by Al-Shabaab. A Kenyan court said on Thursday it would be unconstitutional for the government to close the Dadaab refugee camp, which houses mostly people who have fled unrest in neighboring Somalia. High Court Judge John Mutivo said the government's decision, specifically targeting Somali refugees, is an act of group persecution, illegal and discriminatory. Nairobi has vowed to shut Dadaab, once considered the world's largest refugee camp. The government says the complex has been used by Islamist militants from Somalia as a recruiting ground for a string of attacks on Kenyan soil. But rights groups argue it would hurt Somalis fleeing violence and poverty. They accuse Kenya of forcibly sending people back to a war zone. The government has dismissed that allegation and says it will appeal the court ruling. U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions has been sworn in as Attorney General during a ceremony at the White House this Thursday. The U.S. Senate confirmed the veteran lawmaker on Wednesday after heated debate and a dramatic confrontation that led to the suspension of a prominent Democrat from floor deliberations. The 52-47 vote makes Sessions a long-serving Republican from Alabama, America's top law enforcement officer. He was an early and ardent supporter of the then presidential candidate Donald Trump and his stance on illegal immigration during last year's election campaign.
He believes in the rule of law. He believes in protecting the American people from crime and violence. He believes in a lawful system of immigration that serves the national interest. And within bounds, those are things that may, from time to time, come before the Office of Attorney General. And I look forward to lawfully and properly advancing those items and others that we as a body share, the American people believe in.
Well, Sessions served in the U.S. Senate for 20 years. He also served as Alabama's Attorney General and as a federal prosecutor. In 1986, then President Ronald Reagan nominated him for a federal judgeship, but the Senate voted down his nomination amid allegations of racial bias in his past. Echoes of that debate resurfaced Tuesday when Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts read a letter from the late wife of slain civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. opposing Sessions for the federal bench. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell immediately accused her of maligning a fellow senator and succeeded in keeping her from further participation in the debate on Sessions' nomination. Now, the fate of President Donald Trump's controversial executive order on immigration is now in the hands of the U.S. federal court system and may eventually go to the Supreme Court. Trump's order, which suspended refugee admissions and temporarily banned entry to people from 7 majority Muslim nations, was put on hold by a federal judge last week. VOA's Jim Malone has more on the heavyweight legal battle.
For President Trump, the executive order tightening immigration is all about keeping Americans secure.
It was done for the security of our nation, the security of our citizens, so that people come in who aren't going to do us harm. And that's why it was done.
We are the resistance. Let us rise up, because
But Trump's order sparked demonstrations around the country. Democrats complained the president was exceeding his power, including Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
We need Republicans to set aside partisan considerations in favor of doing what's best for the country.
Opponents say the immigration order is discriminatory and unconstitutional. But Trump may have history on his side when it comes to presidential action to regulate immigration, says legal expert Dan McLaughlin.
So, because the president is relying on authority that has been delegated to him by Congress, he also has very broad authority, whether you think his policy is wise or not, very broad authority to act within the law.
The federal courts will now decide if Trump has gone beyond his presidential authority in issuing his executive orders, says expert Paul Schiff-Berman.
The issue, I think, is whether these executive orders go farther, and I think that they do, both in their scope and in the incredibly ill-considered way in which they've been issued.
Before turning to politics, Trump built a reputation as a dynamic businessman with a brand known internationally. But now as president, dealing with the limits of executive authority and the checks applied by Congress and the court system could prove to be a challenge, says American University expert James Thurber.
We have separation of powers in our democracy. It's slow, it's deliberative, it's transparent. As a businessman, he likes to say, you know, you're fired, or let's get this done, let's move ahead. Well, in a democracy, you can't do that. That's going to frustrate him.
A lower court ruling temporarily halting Trump's immigration order led to many happy scenes at airports as families were reunited. But it's likely the Supreme Court will have the last word on Trump's travel ban and on the issue of presidential authority in this case. Jim Malone, VOA News, Washington.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We are also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. And also check us out, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, survivors' stories of torture and escape in the final part of our special series, Boko Haram, Terror and Masked. Stay with us.
I'm Milar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Today, Voice of America is broadcasting the fourth and final installment of a broadcast series, Boko Haram, Terror and Masked, that provides an unprecedented look inside one of the world's deadliest extremist groups. This VOA series draws on 18 hours of raw video recorded by Boko Haram and obtained by VOA. VOA journalists spend months reviewing and translating the videos and traveling to northeast Nigeria to provide additional in-depth reporting. In part 4 of the series, titled Ruin and Recovery, we hear the stories and hope from Nigerians who survived Boko Haram's violent tactics. VOA visited cities once considered off-limits and witnessed how Nigerians are attempting to rebuild. Viewer discretion is advised.
In 7 years of Boko Haram terror, millions of Nigerians suffered bitterly. But since the spring of 2016, a renewed offensive by the Nigerian military recaptured dozens of towns and villages that had been under the group's brutal control. Boko Haram's own cameras documented it. In 18 hours of captured videos obtained exclusively by VOA, they recorded Nigerians being executed in public, beaten, maimed. Who had survived? What were their stories? VOA went to Nigeria in September of 2016. Our goal, to check the government's claims of better security in places shown in the videos and other Boko Haram strongholds. Our first destination, Bama, second largest city in Borno State, where 300,000 lived until Boko Haram took over in 2014. We traveled with a military convoy, 12 trucks with anti-aircraft guns and dozens of troops. Bama was the scene of one of the war's worst atrocities. We found one man who survived. Alhaji Madu lived because he ran. A video of the atrocities at the bridge surfaced online.
Kanta aka kawo an loda mutane aka kawo su shikenan daya bayan daya wani kuma a nan a cikin nan in aka sa tukun kuma wani ya rika kamfa guda biyu wannan sai a harba kai sai a jafa shi.
In one afternoon, more than 200 people were killed. Now in Bama, street after street stood empty. Buildings torched as Boko Haram fled. The Emir's palace, where the local chief and leaders once met to welcome visitors.
Apart from the mosque, every other thing was gone.
The legacy of destruction is the same in other towns Boko Haram abandoned. Until they can be rebuilt, there's nothing for anyone to come home to. Across the northeast, nearly 2 million people were forced from their homes by Boko Haram. Some now live with friends and family, but many are in camps scattered across the region. In this camp at Bama, 27,000 get by on limited food and water. More stream in daily. This young woman was abducted at age 14 and taken to the Sambisa forest, a rugged Boko Haram sanctuary twice the size of Belgium. She was forced to wed a fighter. Our convoy tried to visit Kumshi, scene of public executions in the Boko Haram videos. Soldiers said no. Though Kumshi was recaptured, the road was too dangerous. We diverted to Damasak, taken only days earlier. Destroyed, abandoned, but for one elderly woman, a lifetime resident who watched Boko Haram drive out her neighbors more than once.
My name is Yatu.
Damasak has been empty for more than a year, she said. For her life to return to normal and for Nigeria to recover will take time. There are some signs of hope. The town of Mainok has been destroyed and rebuilt 4 times as Boko swept in and out. Local chief Lawan Bukar Chiari said more than 200 villagers died.
A lokacin da 'yan Boko Haram suke kawo mana hare-haren nan, ba mu da securities a nan gari. Aka yi shekara 1, 2, 3 muna nan haka. To duk wanda suke rayen suka gudu suka bar gari.
Mainok is being rebuilt yet again. Thanks to a military post, residents are trickling back.
In suka kamala gyare-gyaren da suke wannan, za a iya abu.
Boko Haram originated in Maiduguri, largest city in the northeast state of Borno. Kashim Shetima is the governor. Since then, he says, much has improved. General Victor Ezugu commands troops in the region. He said better intelligence and airstrikes are targeting Boko Haram camps, but there is more to do.
We've done about 70-75% of the job. They are operating in bits and in little groups.
In December of 2016, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari made a bolder claim. Boko Haram was done for, pushed out of their biggest enclave in the Sambisa. But the war is far from over. Boko Haram suicide bombers attack at will, even in Maiduguri. Thousands of civilians remain captive, among them most of the 276 Chibok schoolgirls kidnapped 2 years ago. Across northeast Nigeria, a humanitarian disaster, inadequate food and water for 5 million. And outside of garrisoned areas, Boko Haram launches regular guerrilla attacks. These local herdsmen had just escaped a Boko Haram ambush. The militants took their wives and children. Boko Haram is hidden, but far from gone.
Well, today, many towns formerly under Boko Haram's control have been liberated by the Nigerian military and neighboring states, providing hope for recovery and reconstruction. With me in the studio is Alberto M. Fernandez, Vice President of the Middle East Media Research Institute. He was the coordinator for strategic counterterrorism communications at the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. from March 2012 to February 2015. Welcome to Africa 54. It's been a long time since we had you here in the studio.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Yes. Now, we've been, all week talking about Boko Haram and their tactics. The question here is, from a counterterrorism perspective, what was missed in the fight against Boko Haram in the very, outset of this group's, emergency that perhaps could have stopped this from growing to the kind of size it has grown?
What happens with groups like Boko Haram, these Salafi jihadist groups, is, of course, they take advantage of a vacuum that exists, a vacuum of poor governance, and poor governance in every sense of the word. We think of poor governance meaning like not good civilian government, but a poor security situation as well creates a vacuum, and they were able to leverage the vacuum that existed, not just politically, socially, but also militarily, to grow. You have to remember that between 2002 and 2009, when Mohammed Yusuf is killed and they become this terrorist group, they were allowed to flourish. They would even go on television in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria. So there was a space that they were able to maneuver in, both ideologically and then militarily, and gain force.
In order to, of course, defeat this kind of groups, you also have to study how they get their military hardware. I mean, how do they organize military? Where do they get these weapons, these vehicles from, and who delivers them?
Well, the reality in much of Africa is the same reality that you have in the Middle East, which is there are large zones of the region that are awash in weapons. And whether you have arms smugglers or spillover from other conflicts in the region, say Libya or the Sahel, or taking weapons from local forces, it's not that difficult to get weapons.
Yeah. Now, we have, over the years, dealt with groups like Al-Qaeda. Now there's ISIS, there's Al-Shabaab in East Africa and Somalia. What strategies are being employed, and can they be duplicated? How you confront Boko Haram, is it similar to how you deal with Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab?
There is a kind of a general similarity. You could say there's the ideological dimension and then there's the physical dimension. The conflict against Boko Haram is not going to be solved by force alone, but you need force. So force is necessary, but not sufficient.
So what else?
The what else is this other, the more nebulous part, which is governance and ideology. You know, especially Boko Haram. Boko Haram, like ISIS, especially, has two elements. It has obviously a Salafi jihadist worldview and has a vision of the world. For Boko Haram, it's of course this imaginary vision of Kanem Bornu at its height and the great glories of that empire, which it uses as a club to beat the Nigerian state, to beat the reality of Nigerian politics and governance and corruption and all of that stuff. So you somehow have to defeat them militarily, crush them militarily, but then you have to have an answer to the siren song, ideological siren song that they have.
And Nigeria keeps saying, you know, we have defeated these ones, they're done for. What is your assessment in a few seconds?
Well, certainly they've made tremendous progress, and I think that needs to be recognized. After President Buhari took office, there have been really impressive improvements in the battle against Boko Haram. But defeating them on the battlefield is only half the victory.
Yeah, because the threat remains. You know, we really appreciate your insights, Alberto.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Alberto M. Fernandez is Vice President of the Middle East Media Research Institute. Thank you very much. Now, to watch the entire VOA special report, the 4-part series, Boko Haram, Terror and Masked, be sure to visit voanews.com, and you'll see it all there. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, signs and symptoms of heart disease in women. We'll bring you the facts you need to know. We'll be right back.
Individually and collectively, JMA condemns the violence.
Joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madul. What do you have for us today, Lino?
Well, Vincent, February is Heart Health Month here in the United States, a time to raise awareness about cardiovascular diseases and how people can prevent them. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says heart disease is the leading cause of death among American women and men. Health experts say it's a serious problem among women globally. They say the issue needs more awareness. According to the World Heart Federation, heart disease and stroke cause 8.6 million deaths among women annually. That's a third of all deaths in women worldwide. In the United States, 1 in 3 women die of heart disease every year. In South Africa, the proportion of cardiovascular disease deaths in women between the ages of 35 and 59 is 150% higher than that of women in the United States. For more insights on women and heart disease, we are joined via Skype from Los Angeles, California, by Dr. Janet Way. She is a cardiologist with the Barbara Streisand Women's Heart Center at the Cedars-Sinai Heart Institute. Dr. Way, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
So we heard these numbers, particularly regards to women and heart disease. This is really staggering. What are some of the main causes with regards to women and heart disease, and how do these causes differ from men?
The main causes for heart disease for women are actually quite similar to men, but there are some specific female-specific risk factors that I will discuss. The primary risk factors are high blood pressure, also known as hypertension, having high cholesterol, smoking, and diabetes. But women also have other risk factors that relate to kind of hormone status. If a woman has a history of premature menopause or has a history of a pregnancy in the past that occurred with early delivery under 37 weeks or preeclampsia during pregnancy, they are at at least 2 to 8-fold risk of increased heart disease later on in life.
Now, for women that do not have those risk factors, we still see women that die of heart attack, even though they don't have a history of heart disease or heart condition. So what are some of the telltale signs that should raise awareness for a woman to see her doctor?
Yes, that's an excellent question. We do know that up to 50% of women may have a sudden cardiac death without any symptoms. And so it is important to know kind of the subtle signs of what heart disease involves. And that may range from any sort of chest discomfort above the waist. It doesn't have to feel like chest pain. It could be more of a pressure or a burning sensation. Women tend to also feel more shortness of breath. Feeling like when they walk up a flight of stairs or have emotional stress that they're feeling a shorter breath, nausea. The discomfort may also be in their neck or up in their jaw area or radiating down their arms or the back. So those are some of the more atypical symptoms. Most women who have heart attacks do have some sort of chest discomfort, however.
So tell us about some basic steps that women can take to prevent heart disease.
The number one step is to see their primary physician. You know, women who are above the age of 30 should always have a blood pressure check every year to evaluate for high blood pressure. They should start having blood tests to look at cholesterol levels. There are some people who have really high cholesterol levels that require them to be on cholesterol-lowering medication even at a younger age. It is also important to know if they have or are at risk for diabetes. This can be done with a blood sugar check. And women who do have signs of premature or early diabetes should pay particular attention to their diet and exercise.
Okay, Dr. Wei, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us from Los Angeles. And that was Dr. Janet Wei. She's a cardiologist with the Barbara Streisand Women's Heart Center at the Cedars-Sinai Heart Institute in Los Angeles. And that's our health report for today, so stay in touch for more. Find me on Twitter at Linor Moudou. Vincent?
Thanks, and that's it. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. When something loses its original shape or form, it does not look very natural or comfortable.
Bent out of shape.
Hey, did you tell Greg about my dinner party?
Yeah, I did. I thought he was invited.
Well, now he's all bent out of shape because I didn't invite him.
I'm sorry. Can you invite him now?
It's too late. His feelings are already hurt.
A person who is bent out of shape is upset or even angry about something. A person can get bent out of shape if they do not like the way someone is treating them. In our example, Greg is bent out of shape because Anna did not tell him about her dinner party. And that's English in a Minute.